Hello there. So today I wanted to talk about trying to conceive with a private donor. I'm going to talk about why I'm currently using a private donor, how I found this private donor, and some positive and negatives about using a private donor. I already had 4 failed IUIs in the States and 1 failed IVF in Denmark. My next step would be to get an IVF with ICSI, but before I try to take this next step, I decided that I have to lose some weight and save some money and kind of prepare myself for this next step. However, I'm already 39 and I don't have much time left and my biological clock is ticking. So I don't want to waste any more cycles without doing anything. So I decided to try to conceive with a private donor while I'm trying to lose weight and save money for this ICSI. I first tried to find a private donor online while I was still in the States, but unfortunately I was not successful. I joined some websites and some Facebook groups and I didn't like any of the guys I saw online. So I attended a meeting of single mothers by choice here in Germany. I told my fertility journey and I asked them for advice, and one of the women there had used a private donor and had 2 daughters from this private donor, and she suggested that I use her private donor because he's still donating and she's good friends with him and she really recommended him. So I talked to her about this donor and then I talked to him on the phone and we met in person and then we signed a contract and got started. Some of the positives of using a private donor is that it's cheaper than using a sperm bank, and you get much more sperm from a private donor than you get from a sperm bank, and the motility is usually better than what the sperm bank has to offer, especially if he is fertile. And my private donor has already fathered many kids, so I know he's fertile. I get much better quality sperm from him than I would get from a sperm bank, and I only have to pay a fraction. Also, the sperm is fresh, which I think is a better quality than frozen sperm. He is very reliable. He has never canceled a meeting that we had set up. And he's very flexible. I sometimes have an irregular cycle, so I sometimes ovulate on day 16 or 17, and sometimes I ovulate on day 24. So there's almost a week in between, and I can just give him a phone call a day before I ovulate and say, hey, can we meet tomorrow? And he always makes time for me, so that's very important that he's always accommodating in that sense. And I also like that he's willing to meet the kids, so he has regular contact with the daughters of that other single mother by choice that recommended him. I know they meet about every 6 months or so. But he would never initiate a meeting like that, so he waits for the mother or the children asking for a meeting. And I like the fact that the kids can get to know their father and don't have to wait until they're 18 or never meet the father. Some negative points are he is Dutch, I am German. That means that he lives about 3 hours away. He likes to donate at night, so I have to drive there after work, and oftentimes I don't get back before midnight. So if I have to work the next day, it can be quite stressful for me. But I'm so happy that he's so flexible and does that this is a low price I have to pay for it. Another negative is that we are 2 completely different people. We don't share a lot of opinions. Character-wise, we couldn't be more different. But I'm not dating him, so that's okay. And I think a lot of these things are not hereditary, so political opinions don't get inherited from your father, but you usually form your own opinion, so I'm not too worried about this. Another negative is that he's a mass donor. He has donated quite a lot. There are a few known mass donors from the Netherlands. There's some guy who has done TV interviews and has mentioned in lots of magazines, and he has hundreds of children. However, that's not my donor. My donor tries to keep it quiet. He would never do an interview about his work as a donor. However, said friend of mine and we could kind of figure out how many children he must have fathered in the last years. We think there are a lot of kids. But that can be a positive thing because the kids will have siblings. And one thing I was always worried about was that if I'm a single mother by choice and I choose a private donor, I was always worried that the donor will decide to demand custody of the child one day, that I would end up with shared custody with some stranger. Now, by choosing a donor who has already fathered tons of kids, I am pretty sure that he won't necessarily pick my kid and try to demand custody of my kid. And I thought that both of these last 2 points, they could happen with a sperm bank donor as well. So we know a little bit about the sperm bank donors from their profiles, but we don't really know what kind of political opinions they hold. Oftentimes we don't really know that unless they talk about it in their profiles, but a lot of them don't, so who knows if we would agree on many things. We also don't know how many children a sperm bank donor will father. Many banks have a limit on how many children they allow a donor to father before they stop selling his sperm. However, my donor first donated for a sperm bank as well, and when he couldn't do that any longer, he decided to donate privately, so he has fathered many more children afterwards. There's never a guarantee that even if the sperm bank says there won't be more than, 20 or 40 other half siblings, there's never a guarantee that he will make up his mind and end up donating privately after donating for the sperm bank. Another risk is, of course, the health. A donor from a sperm bank usually is tested for all kinds of STDs, and you actually find out quite a lot about his health history. And with a private donor, that is usually not the case. You can pay the donor to get some tests done. But to be honest, you don't really know if you have him tested for something if he doesn't turn around and meet another person somewhere and get infected with who knows what. So the business about using a private donor involves a lot of trust. You can never be 100% sure if the person is sick or not. So there's a lot of trust involved, and you have to see if you trust this person or not. So I hope this helped you a little bit learning about my private donor and how I chose this donor and what some of the thoughts were that went through my head selecting this donor. If you enjoyed listening to my story, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I will upload a new video soon. Bye bye!